Namo Tassa. I wanted to do another little video about animals compared to humans. There are different ways to approach that topic and connection or comparison between animals and humans. This time is just about that aspect that I mentioned many times to many people, just as much as, of course, in Buddhism too, humans are placed in a higher realm than animals, and as such, in general, of course, humans think that they are more intelligent than animals, only because they have one main or a few small extra capacities in the brain. But then, when you look at the behavior, sometimes it's really hard to tell which way that goes for that difference, or which one behave in a more logical way or more paradoxical way. So basically, humans exactly think that they are more intelligent because they have developed civilizations, even though it comes down to being in communities, and animals actually, of course, live in communities, many of them, like the herds, right? The herd mentality, and which also applies to human way. But then the humans, of course, have evolved many things, different nations, different religions, different languages, basically different cultures, and they consider that an evolution as a progress compared to animals. And that's where I would argue a lot about these things, because ultimately, as I mean, and what I see most of the time, in one way, as I always say, as it is very known, the most simple way usually is the best and the most efficient. And those extra brain capacities that the humans have, usually when you just look around, what do they seem to have done is to have made everything more complicated. So as much as the humans consider themselves quite evolved that way, what I see mainly is complicated interconnections and exchanges and relationships between humans everywhere. Exactly because of all these things that they like to label themselves with, and ultimately that they are so proud of, that they defend as part of their identity. And that's again that big problem there, that notion of personality or identity, and the identity of a nation, when of course animals don't have this problem. And one example typically is that many cultures, nations, are very proud of their language, and there are some smaller ones are scared to lose the language, and they say if we lose our language, it's like we lose our culture, we lose our identity. Well, is that such a big deal again? Is that a real priority in life? But what I see after traveling so much is that one thing that makes really life complicated in the world in general is that humans don't speak the same languages in so many places. And again, they can be proud to have their own language in their own country, their own nation, but or ethnic group, but actually at the end it makes most of the relationships where different nations meet or at a global scale, it makes everything more complicated. It's that simple, right? Dogs speak dog, they understand each other, they have different characteristic, or like we can say psychological traits depending on the species, yet it's more simple of course for them, but then dogs speak dogs, so dogs can understand each other like that, and horses speak horse and stuff. But humans, so proud to have supposedly progressed, evolved over millennia, to me the conclusion is simple, that they have mostly made everything more complicated, and it just created more problems, and ultimately that's what we see in the world right now. Does it look like the world is getting better and better, more and more ordered, more and more harmonious around the globe? Really? Sayagyi Ubakin has mentioned something about that before too. And that's the point. That's why Vipassana and meditation is really needed now, at least for the people who want to remain sane in the mind. And what does that teach you as the great values of Buddhism is that when you go back to simplify your life and live simple, uncomplicated, everything works better and you feel better, more balanced in the mind, healthier. And that's why I say that ultimately I wish that so many people could be like animals that way, in the way they relate to each other. And that's why animals in one way have it better and easier, because they don't have so many psychotic disorders, so many things that they worry about, that they think about, that they stress about, that they try to live upon, or holding some image and some standards, some social status. Well, some do actually, of course, in the herd, but it's not to the extent of humans. This is full-on madness with mankind. First of all, that so many so-called nations, which is again totally against nature, have been created, and they want to defend their own so-called culture, and so that's why they fight each other. And also it's based on religions, values, whatever. Again, only humans are mad enough, insane enough to have created all those unnecessary, superficial, futile values that they actually hold on so strongly to, like it's their identity, in the way that if they lose any of these, then it's like they're dying. And that's how humans are so disconnected from nature and the laws of nature. And that's why following these cultural traditions or values, they still feel entitled to destroy the nature, which is still what supplies them life. And at the same time, of course, as we have witnessed the last 50, 60 years, they just destroy a lot of life and a lot of other beings, animals around everywhere. So again, is that a sign of intelligence and positive evolution as far as human goes compared to animals? Not really. So animals in one way have it more simple, and that's why they behave more direct. They can speak the way they feel directly, so they don't cheat you, right? Humans, basically, unfortunately, at the end, because they are mostly controlled by the kilesa, the mind defilement, and which is ignorance or delusion, and then the passion or greed and hatred or aversion, whatever, all the negative aspect like that. Yes, that sounds negative, but that's the reality. That's what controls their mind most of the time. And there is a famous story like that too. Like, for example, whether two men argue badly, fight, really badly, or as Goenka also refer to a similar story in the course, then the human mind is such that they will hold grudge for 10 years or whatever, and they will still remember once in a while that episode, and they will still be angry inside that person and what happened. And then if they meet again, then they will remember, of course, and then the grudge will be there and everything. But for example, if you hurt a dog one time, then if you hurt it badly, maybe 10 years later, actually it will recognize you as the one who hurt him before, but he's not aware of the 10 years, and he hasn't spent the 10 years with a mind full of resentment, remembering that episode and holding grudge about that. So the extra capacities that the human brain has, unfortunately, most of the time is misused, and only to make everything more complicated. And basically, besides the fact that I don't support so much modern psychology, what they think they know or understand, but they have the terms, and yes, basically mankind in general really is living through some kind of psychosis, neurosis, OCD behaviors, because only very, very few humans actually understand properly and master those extra brain capacities that we have compared to animals. And that's why actually it shows again with those people who have a strong awareness in general and are kind to beings and are full of only good intentions, and they don't live by the mind defilements so much. They don't have greed, they don't have resentment or hatred, they don't have like uncontrolled passion, envy, jealousy, all of these things. And they are very aware of what's going on every time they interact with another being, human or animal. And their intentions are always clear, and they have control over their reactions. Again, being aware of what's going on, and that a negative reaction never helps. Don't need to be emotional about things. Never need to panic. But as it is explained in life coaching or psychology also, again, for so many humans, they still operate by the primitive mind, right? The reptilian mind. And then in many situations, if it's something that they're not familiar with, that's not within the comfort zone, then we have the classic fight or flight reflex. Again, conditioning, right? Conditioning is the big word also in Buddhism, since the ultimate goal of the practice of Dhamma is to reach Nibbana. And Nibbana is exactly also one way defined by the unconditioned. Of course, very difficult to attain, to reach that, to experience that, but that is the main point. So most humans, as I've explained before, they live as Pavlovian dogs, as I would say. Everything is done by conditioned reflexes. By the stimulus goes, then there is the reaction, most of the time uncontrolled, many times unaware. Instant reaction to stimuli. And that's actually the animal level of existence anyway. So in that sense, I wish that humans, at least in their interaction, could become as sincere and true and direct as animals are. So I've written a long time ago when I was younger that that extra brain capacity that humans have ultimately is misused, in a sense that they use it a lot for lying to themselves and thus lying to others, which animals don't do, because again, animals are more direct with in their interaction, right? They basically speak their mind and they act according to their feelings directly. So there are some sayings around in different cultures about that. But in one way, again, that's why humans use and abuse animals, because animals are predictable that way. And many humans with the primitive mindset like that, they actually feel strong and powerful and superior only because they can control and predict the trick some animals. But again, that is the trait of a low mind, of a weak mind, as typical humans are that way. When you want to take advantage and feel powerful by tricking a weaker, simpler mind, yeah, of course, there's no strength in that, and there's no power. It's just a sign of weakness. But I mean, in general, so especially in Southeast Asia, they are still very, very conservative, let's say, or very traditional with their values and the way they interact. And that doesn't have to do with nature and the natural laws, actually, even though they think that's the way it should be. Just like any culture is brainwashing, is conditioning of the mind. And that's why you can see that it's not natural, because some cultures are very, very different, and some have totally opposite values. In that culture, if you do this, that's respectful. If you do that, that's really, really no, big no, and disrespectful. But then in another culture, it's the opposite. So what does it mean? That all this, of course, is made up, meaning that it's artificial, and it's not, has no real value, intrinsic value in nature. It goes against nature, actually. While animals, of course, they don't know better than to live according to the laws of nature. So humans like that have become so complicated and crazy and psychotic and neurotic only for having created what they think is an evolution called culture. But actually, most of the time, this has nothing to do with the real laws of nature, hence all the problems at every level. And that's why the relationships, the interactions between humans are so complicated, and there's so much misunderstanding, and that's why there's all the aggressivity and wars. But even at home, right, even within the same families, people cannot agree and fight because of so many things, so many values to talk about, so many opinions. But actually, they should take example on animals that way, just like they said. And so now the late Jane Goodall mentioned in one video about the dog maybe being the best animal to have, and that's why, of course, dogs are called the best friend for human, is because despite in many situations the abuse that they have, again, those people satisfying the control freak issues on the dogs because it's so easy, and the dog doesn't know better than still respect the owner most of the time. And that's why you can see actually that the only animals that start to have some more like not sane values in their mind are the animals that have become pets to humans, which I use to interact with humans. Then they learn from humans to be to not be straight in the behavior, and somewhat to lie or to try to trick. And that's learned behavior from humans, actually, for many of them. So anyway, that is to say that it would be nice if humans took example on animals, actually, for most of them, to have a healthier, more clear and direct communication and interaction and relationships at every level, from family to loving relationship to so-called international relationships. Because the notion of nation is a complete nonsense on this planet, because all the resources are shared now anyway. And this so-called notion of evolution, progress into a higher intellect with cultures and cultural values and traditions and religion and languages, this actually means nothing in the face of nature, because the laws of nature apply to something deeper than that, and really more important than those ego-based values that only humans bring around, and usually, as we see now anyway, of course, and the last decades, only to bring upon more misery around for themselves and for other beings and the animals. So that's just expressing that idea. Of course, not much hope that things will change, because we see that it has been the evolution over millennia, and especially the last couple of 100 years, and especially the last 50 years, everything is going exponentially, but not in the right direction. And I'm not going to fall into the new agey kind of ideas that it's all shifting now and we are getting better actually, and blah blah blah. No, just being realistic about what's happening. The same as climate change, unbelievable that some people will say that there's no real climate change, but if you look around over the last 10-20 years, you obviously witness the changes in the climate. The signs are right there in front of everybody, with temperatures and with the glaciers receding and everything. So, but again, only humans are so crazy enough due to their brain evolution with their new capacities that they can just deny reality and lie to themselves and try to convince everybody else that what they believe is the truth. And that's why we are living in a crazier and crazier world, more and more madness around, more and more moha. And actually that goes anyway into another scale of knowledge in Buddhism at the higher level, when we go through cycles anyway, and each human civilization around go through cycles. I'm talking about the great length of time civilization, because there have been human type civilizations before this one appeared, whatever they like to say, tens of thousands of years ago or whatever. But so in Buddhism there is the different period in a cycle, right? There is the developing period, developed period, enveloping period, and enveloped period. So I can let you guess which period we are in now, and we are getting to an end of a cycle, obviously, because madness has become the norm. The ego is trying to rule like really everything. There's no much humility around anymore, which is the best quality to evolve and to gain wisdom as a human, which is on the other hand the extra capacity that originally the human could have to gain that wisdom over time during a life, combined with that extra awareness that humans have compared to animals. But obviously very, very few care to use that. So we see the results around us now, and future will tell, but everything is karma. So again, law of nature, nobody can cheat the law of nature. The people who have an agenda in place at the global scale to exactly make the mankind go in that direction like it has been going, they think so high of themselves and they think they know better. But you can't cheat life, you can't cheat karma, because that's the law of nature. Everything is subject to that. Not only beings and human beings, but everything. So the future will show, and that's just how it is, and cycles after cycles is the same story. So, but I mean, at least in a everyday life situation, it would be nice if human could be less complicated, simplify their life, simplify their mind consciously, in a way of interacting more genuinely, authentically, and speak directly with awareness, with care, with kindness, and behave as such, and not create superficial values that have nothing to do with real life, just to make everything more clear and simple. That will be a good thing.